I refused to lend my husband's brother hundreds of dollars, so his entire family staged a family vote to pressure me into compliance. There they all sat grinning, chanting majority rules while my husband did nothing. I calmly nodded and said, fine. Let's vote on something else, then produced a shocking document that turned their smug faces to horror and unleashed total chaos. This happened just last year. Still feels fresh. Still stings. I was married for 8 years, and I thought I understood what loyalty meant. I believed marriage was about being a team. I believed family wasn't just blood, it was about who showed up when things got tough. Turns out, I was wrong. Let me back up. I live in a small town in upstate New York. My husband, Brian, comes from a big, very traditional family. Think Sunday dinners at his mom's house, every week, no exceptions. Lots of expectations. Lots of opinions. Tons of unspoken rules. I didn't grow up like that, but I made an effort. I showed up. I smiled. I brought casseroles. I played the part. But his family never really accepted me. They were polite, sure, but always just a little distant. Like there was this invisible circle I'd never be allowed to step into. Still, I loved Brian. And I believed that love would be enough. Then his younger brother Ryan got himself into some serious financial trouble. Ryan's the guy with big dreams that never land. He's tried everything, drop shipping, crypto consulting, luxury car flipping, you name it. Every scheme failed, but the family always gave him a pass. They'd say things like, he's just ambitious, or he's figuring it out. Well, this time Ryan took out a massive personal loan and got his parents to co-sign. And surprise, he defaulted. The bank came after them. I guess the family assumed I'd be the financial safety net. I work full-time as a surgical nurse. I'm careful with money. Brian and I don't have kids, and I've built up a solid savings over the years. So one day, Ryan shows up at our house with this whole story about needing $18,000 just for a few months. I told him no calmly and kindly. I explained that we had our money tied up in house repairs, and frankly, I wasn't comfortable lending that much to someone with his history. He didn't push. Just nodded and said he understood. I actually felt bad for him until 3 days later. That's when I got invited to a family meeting at Brian's parents' house. Everyone was there, siblings, their spouses, parents. Everyone but Ryan, oddly. He was running late. They were all smiling, that overly sweet smile that makes your stomach turn. Then it started. Brian's dad said they'd had some family discussions and were worried about Ryan. They all knew I had the money, and since Ryan's problem affected everyone, they decided to handle it democratically. And then came the kicker. We're calling a family vote. A family vote. Like I was some hostile corporate acquisition. I looked at Brian, waiting for him to shut this down. He didn't. He just looked exhausted, or scared. Maybe both. I asked, are you serious? His mom said, yes, majority rules. That way it's fair. Like we were in court instead of real life. I kept quiet. They voted. Every single one of them said yes, that Brian and I should lend Ryan the money. Then they all turned to look at me, like I was just supposed to go along with it because they'd performed some weird ritual. I nodded slowly and said, okay, let's vote on something else. There was silence. Confused faces. My voice stayed calm. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila envelope. Slid it across the table to Brian. He looked confused. His dad asked, what's this? I said, it's a copy of the quitclaim deed for our house. The one we fully own. Only my name is on the title. More silence. I pulled out another paper from the envelope. And here's a notarized prenup amendment I had drawn up last month. Since you're all so fond of votes, I wanted to make sure my assets are clearly separate. I turned to Brian. I left a copy on your nightstand last week, just in case. His mom looked like she bit into a lemon. His sister's jaw dropped. His dad turned beet red. Then I looked straight at Brian. So, wanna have another vote? This time on whether we stay married. He didn't say a word. The room went completely still, and that's when Ryan walked in. Casual as ever, like he hadn't just blown up my marriage. Wearing that smug half-smile like the world owed him something. Sorry I'm late, he said, dropping into the only empty chair like we were just having brunch. He looked around, noticed the envelope on the table, saw everyone's faces. What did I miss? He asked, grinning. No one answered. His mom cleared her throat and muttered, we were discussing options. I looked him in the eye and said, I told them no. He tilted his head and smirked. Yeah, and we voted. I smiled, just barely. Right. And I voted too, with legal paperwork. That wiped the grin right off his face. I could see him trying to figure out what just happened, where his backup had gone. That's when I realized he had no idea about the prenup change. He didn't even think I was serious. He turned to Brian. Dude, what the hell? Brian just sat there. Silent. So Ryan exploded. He stood up and shouted, "You're just going to let her do this? Let her humiliate us like this?" Us. That one word lit something inside me. Like I wasn't even a person anymore, just some outsider they had to deal with. Brian opened his mouth, but still didn't say anything. That's when his dad slammed his fist on the table. "This is not how family works," he yelled. "You don't bring lawyers into a family matter. You don't draw lines in the sand. We're not strangers." I leaned forward. "You made it a transaction when you voted like it was a boardroom. You treated me like a bank account. Here's your revised YouTube script, rewritten in clear, natural American English with the same meaning and length. Just as you asked, no headings, same flow." I snapped back, and his face turned purple. Then came the second bombshell. Brian's sister Morgan, the quiet one, always keeping to herself, finally spoke. She said, "You know what? I'm done pretending." Everyone turned toward her. "I loaned Ryan $10,000 last year," she continued. "Never got it back. I didn't say anything before because I didn't want to start drama, but watching you all gang up on her like this, I'm done being quiet." The room went dead silent. Ryan blinked. "What are you talking about?" Morgan let out this dry, bitter laugh. "You promised to pay me back in 6 months. Said you were flipping a Tesla and needed the cash fast. Then you ghosted me after I wired it." Ryan looked straight at his mom. "She's lying." But something shifted in the air, like a curtain finally lifting. That's when Brian's youngest brother Jason quietly said, "I thought I was the only one." Then he added, "I gave him $5,000 on my credit card. He said it was for a course. That was 2 years ago." Suddenly, it was like a dam broke. One after another, people started speaking up. A cousin, an uncle, even Brian's mom looked like she might throw up. Turned out Ryan had been slowly draining everyone around him, always with a different story, always with a promise. Always a lie. I just sat there, silent, watching everything collapse. Ryan tried to shout over the noise. "You're all just trying to make me look bad." I leaned back in my chair. "You didn't need any help with that." Then he turned to Brian, panicking. "Say something, man." Brian finally looked at me. And all he said was, "When did you change the prenup?" That was it. No apology. No, let's talk about this later. Not even "you were right." Just that. I stared at him for a long time. My throat felt tight, not from sadness, but from pure exhaustion. "About 6 weeks ago," I said. "Right after Ryan's last business opportunity." Brian's mom started crying. His dad sat down like he'd just been punched in the gut. Ryan stormed out. Nobody followed. I grabbed my purse. Brian stood like he was going to come after me, but I held up a hand. "Don't." Then I walked out. But that wasn't the end. That night, I got a message from Morgan. She wanted to talk. And what she told me changed everything I thought I knew about Brian's family and my marriage. "Let me know if you want part 3. Trust me, it only gets darker." I didn't sleep that night. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something to hit, anger, grief, clarity. But there was nothing. Just silence. Around 2 a.m., I finally opened Morgan's message. It just said, "Can we talk?" There's stuff I didn't say. You deserve to know. We met the next afternoon at a small coffee shop, neutral ground. She looked tense but calm, like she'd made peace with what she had to do. She didn't waste any time. "I don't know how to say this without making it worse," she started. "But I've been waiting for someone to finally see through Ryan. And maybe Brian, too." That last part hit like a punch. I asked her what she meant. She took a deep breath. "Ryan's been a parasite for years. But Brian? He's not just standing by. He's part of it." I didn't get it. Then she said something that made my stomach twist. "You remember that crypto thing Ryan did last year? The one that blew up and left him broke?" I nodded. Brian was in on it. They did it together. That's where most of Ryan's debt came from. I stared at her, completely stunned. She pulled out her phone and showed me screenshots, messages, emails, even payment receipts. Brian didn't just know about Ryan's messes, he helped create them. He covered for him, moved money between accounts, even transferred funds from our savings. "I was told not to say anything," Morgan said quietly. "Brian said it would only make things worse. He promised to fix it." I believed him. But now I know. He was just protecting himself. I whispered, "He used our savings." She didn't respond. She didn't have to. Suddenly I remembered something. 3 months ago, I noticed a huge withdrawal from one of our accounts. Brian said it was for emergency home repairs and even showed me a fake invoice. I believed him. I felt sick. Morgan reached across the table and touched my hand. "You weren't crazy. You never were." I nodded, slowly, then asked, "Why are you telling me this now?" She hesitated, then said, because I found out something else. I braced myself. Brian and Ryan went to your parents last month. Tried to borrow from them too. I blinked. What? They told your parents you were considering investing in Ryan's new business. Said they wanted to get in before it launched. Your mom called me after you left last night. She was worried. That's when I realized they're not just using you. They're trying to sell you. I couldn't breathe. They used my name, my reputation, to try to scam my own family. I stood up. I had to move, to think, to do something. Morgan grabbed my arm. I know you're furious. But if you're going to make a move, be smart. Stay one step ahead. I'll help. I asked her what she meant. She gave me a tired, sharp smile. I've been documenting everything for years. Bank records, texts, emails, screenshots. If you want out clean, you're going to need proof. That was the moment something inside me clicked. The numbness cracked. I wasn't going to let them play me anymore. Not Brian. Not Ryan. Not any of them. I looked Morgan in the eye. Send me everything. And she did. By the end of the week, I had enough to financially, emotionally, and legally destroy them both if I wanted to. But I wasn't done. Because the more I looked, the more I uncovered. Brian had one more secret. And it had nothing to do with money. It was the reason he never defended me. The reason Ryan always had so much control. A week passed. Every day, I found something new. Another transfer. Another lie. Another thread in the web. Brian and Ryan's little game. I had Morgan's folder, my bank records, and even checked my credit. Turns out, Brian had applied for 2 credit cards in my name. Never used them, just left them sitting there, probably waiting for the next big idea. The night everything came to a head, I didn't expect it to blow up the way it did, but it did. And once it started, it didn't stop. Brian's mom invited us all to another Sunday dinner. Same house, same table. But this time, I said yes. I had one goal. I wanted everyone in one place. When we got there, the mood was off, fake smiles, forced laughter. It was clear they thought the storm had passed. Brian sat next to me, acting like everything was fine. He kept checking his phone, but he smiled whenever someone looked his way. Ryan wasn't there running late again. Typical. I waited until dinner was served, drinks poured, and everyone seemed comfortable. Then I stood up. I think it's time for one more vote, I said. They froze. Brian looked at me, confused. I pulled out a small stack of papers from my bag. I didn't make a big show of it. No dramatic drops, no raised voice. I just laid them on the table, one by one. This, I said, pointing to the first one, is proof of a joint bank account between Brian and Ryan, opened 3 years ago. It transferred almost $60,000, most of it from our accounts, some from loans. Brian's mom opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. This, I continued, tapping another page, is a forged invoice. Brian gave it to me 3 months ago, saying it was for a roofing contractor. The company doesn't exist. Silence. And this, I said, holding up the last page, is a copy of an email sent to my parents, using my name, promising them equity in Ryan's fake startup. Brian, you're busted. His face drained of color. No one spoke, so I kept going. I thought Ryan was the only con artist here, but you. I turned to Brian. You're just better at hiding it. You knew I'd never say yes, so you worked around me. Used me. His mom whispered, that can't be true. Morgan spoke up from the far end of the table. It is. She pulled out her phone. I've got copies of the messages too. Brian asked me to cover for him when he took out the money. He said he'd handle it before you noticed. Brian finally stood, angry now. What do you want from me, huh? I was trying to fix things. Ryan was in over his head. I cut him off. You scheme. You lie. You protect him because he knows your secrets. That's why you never defended me, isn't it? He looked at me, and for the first time through all of this, he looked guilty. I stepped closer. What does Ryan have on you? Brian was silent. He blinked, swallowed, then muttered, it's not like that. Then what's it like? I asked. He looked around the table, at his dad, at Morgan, then he broke. I covered for him. Years ago, when I got into legal trouble with a job, falsified reports. I could have gone to jail. He took the blame. I owe him. Dead quiet. Brian's dad spoke, soft but furious. You lied to us. To her. You used your wife to cover a debt you should have paid with honesty. Brian looked down, defeated. I didn't know what else to do. She always had control over the money. I just needed a way to fix it before she noticed. There it was again, control. He saw me as the one with the money, the power, the gatekeeper, not a partner. Just a tool. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just reached into my purse. One final paper, a folded document. I placed it in front of him. He stared at it, opened it, and his face crumbled. It was a divorce petition. Already signed on my end. No drama. No screaming. Just an end. Majority rules, right? I said quietly. Well, I vote to leave. Then I turned and walked out. No one stopped me. Not even his mother. I stayed in a hotel that night. 3 hours later, Morgan texted me. He left. No one said goodbye. The fallout came quickly. Brian tried calling, left me a voicemail, crying. Said he was lost. Said he didn't know how things got so bad. Said we could rebuild. I didn't answer. 2 days later, I served the papers officially. Turns out the prenup and the documentation saved me more than just money. It saved me years of dragging out a divorce. Morgan kept helping. She actually decided to take legal action against Ryan for the unpaid loan. Ryan disappeared for a while, deleted his socials. Rumor has it, he's living in New Jersey now, working under a fake LLC. Brian moved back in with his parents. The family dinners stopped. I wish I could say I walked away clean. I didn't. There were nights I cried myself sick. Nights I questioned everything. 8 years with someone who looked me in the eye and still chose lies over the truth, it haunts you. But now I sleep peacefully for the first time in years. And if there's one thing I learned from all this, it's that when someone says majority rules, remember this. You don't need a vote to leave a burning house. You just need the courage to walk out the door. And I did. The weeks that followed felt like an endless blur, each day blending into the next. I stayed in that hotel for a while, unsure of what the future held but certain that it didn't include Brian. For the first time in years, I could finally breathe. But with that sense of relief came an unsettling quiet. The kind of silence you get after the storm has passed and everything around you is still. I spent those days sorting through the wreckage. It wasn't just about Brian and Ryan anymore. It wasn't even just about the money or the lies. It was about me. About rebuilding myself from the ground up. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was the realization that I had let myself be manipulated for so long. That the person I thought I knew and trusted, the man I had shared my life with, wasn't even a stranger. He was a different version of someone I had made myself believe in. The first few nights were rough. There was no one to talk to, no one to turn to when the panic set in. But Morgan reached out often. At first, it was just a few texts to check in, then some calls. She had her own struggles to deal with, but in a way, our bond grew stronger because of it. She wasn't just my sister-in-law anymore. She was someone who truly understood what I was going through. One night, after yet another round of long silences, she told me something that made me rethink everything. She told me that she had reached out to Ryan, trying to get him to take responsibility for what he had done. But he was still avoiding her, still pretending to be untouchable. I don't think he'll ever change, she said, her voice cracking a little. But you? You've already changed, and you're stronger than you think. Her words stuck with me, and as the days wore on, I started to see myself differently. I wasn't just a victim of circumstance. I wasn't a bystander in my own life. I had walked away. I had taken control. And in doing so, I found a part of myself I didn't even know existed. The divorce went through smoothly enough. The papers were served, and Brian didn't fight it. He didn't even try to make a scene, which I thought was a bit surprising. Maybe he finally realized there was no point. His calls became less frequent, his messages slower to come. I didn't respond. Not once. I started looking for a place to live. Not a hotel this time, but somewhere I could call my own. Somewhere I could rebuild. The apartment search was both exciting and terrifying. I wasn't sure where I wanted to be, but I knew I wanted it to feel like me. Somewhere bright, somewhere peaceful. Somewhere I could start over without the weight of everything hanging over me. I found a little place on the edge of town. It wasn't big, but it had a charm about it. There was something about the way the sunlight hit the windows in the morning that made it feel like a fresh start. I signed the lease, packed up my things, and moved in. But the first few nights alone in that apartment were hard. There was a sense of emptiness that I hadn't expected. For so long, my life had been filled with noise, constant conflict, drama, the stress of keeping things together. Now, there was only silence. And while I had hoped for peace, it felt almost foreign to me. I spent those first weeks redecorating, painting walls, buying new furniture. Everything was carefully chosen with the idea that it would be mine and only mine. No more second guessing. No more pretending to be something I wasn't. I wanted to create a space that reflected the person I was becoming. A person who wasn't afraid to stand up for herself. A person who didn't need anyone else's approval to live her life. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, the panic subsided. The quiet that once felt so heavy started to feel like freedom. I began to focus more on my own healing. I started running again. Not for anyone, Not for any reason other than to feel the wind on my face and the strength in my legs. It was small, but it was mine. It was a step in the right direction. I also started seeing a therapist. At first, it felt like just another box to check off. But the more I talked, the more I realized how much I had been carrying for so long. The guilt, the shame, the anger. It wasn't just about Brian or Ryan. It was about my whole life. My relationship with my mother. The years of putting everyone else first. The years of thinking I had to hold everything together, when in reality, I had been falling apart. The therapy sessions weren't easy, but they helped. They helped me start understanding that I wasn't responsible for anyone else's choices, that the lies and manipulation weren't my fault, that it was okay to be angry, it was okay to feel hurt, and it was okay to let go. One day, a few months after everything had settled, Morgan called me again. This time, it wasn't just a check-in. She sounded different, more confident. "I need to tell you something," she said. "I talked to Ryan." My stomach tightened. I hadn't heard from Ryan in months. I wasn't sure I wanted to, but Morgan kept talking. He's sorry. I mean, really sorry. He said he knows what he did was wrong, and he doesn't know how to fix it, but he's trying. He's seeing someone. He's trying to make things right. I was silent for a moment, processing her words. I wasn't sure how to feel. Part of me wanted to be angry, to tell her that it was too little, too late. But another part of me, a part one didn't even know was there, felt relief. Maybe Ryan would never change. Maybe he would. But at least now he was trying. And that was something I hadn't expected. "I'm glad he's doing the work," I said quietly. "But that's his journey, not mine." Morgan paused, then agreed. "Yeah, you've got your own now." And I did. I had my own path to walk. My own future to build. I had let go of the past, and in doing so, I had found something I didn't even realize I was missing. Peace. A few months later, I got a message from Brian. I didn't know what to expect, but when I opened it, I found only a short note. It was an apology of sorts. He said he was sorry for everything. For the lies. For the hurt. For the way he had treated me. He said he understood why I left. And though it didn't change anything, it was a step forward for both of us. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had already moved on. And with that, the final chapter closed. I was free. I was whole. And for the first time in a long time, I was finally at peace with who I was. As I sat back in my new apartment one evening, looking out at the city skyline, I realized something. It wasn't about the marriage or the betrayal. It wasn't even about the money or the lies. It was about me. I had found my voice. I had found my strength. And no one could take that from me. Because when you've been through the fire and walked away from the flames, you come out stronger. You come out free. And that, I think, is the most powerful thing of all.